Welcome back to some new r/PettyRevenge stories, where people share small victories over those who wronged them. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now let's start with the first story. It's called Replacement. I work for a big company where it's easy to get moved around. If someone higher up decides they don't like working with you for whatever reason. So I was reassigned to another team without much of an explanation. Just a vague, it doesn't seem to be working between you and your boss, from someone even higher up. Now, I've been with this company for 17 years in various positions, so I know pretty much everyone. My replacement, however, is brand new to the company and has never worked in my field. He only completed a short re-employment course, yet somehow he was given a higher position than I did, with better benefits. To be clear, this guy has never done anything wrong to me personally, but the irony is that he keeps asking me how to do his job, the same job I was supposedly not doing well enough. So I've decided to keep my responses minimal. I could make his life a lot easier, or I could just keep telling him to ask his boss instead. And let's just say, I've chosen the second option. I know it's a bit petty, but I make sure to keep my responses professional enough to stay within the lines of company policy. The next story is called Birth Name. This happened a few years ago, when I was in secondary school, around 15 years old. Every morning we would have form time, where the teacher would take attendance and tell us about any announcements before we went to our other classes. My form tutor was quite a grumpy person, known for being really difficult. My parents gave me a shortened version of a formal name, so for the sake of the story, let's say they named me Alex, short for Alexander. Every time she would call the roll, she would insist on using my full name, Alexander. I told her several times that it wasn't the name I went by, and politely asked her to call me Alex, which is what my parents called me. She would get frustrated and say, "Don't be silly, no one is called Alex. Your name is Alexander. Alex is just what you want to be called." No matter how much I explained, she refused to listen. Eventually she even gave me a detention for asking her to use my correct name. When the school called to inform my parents about the detention, they were not happy at all. I told them the reason I was being punished was for asking my teacher to call me by my correct name. And they decided to do something about it. They gave me a trump card to use, my birth certificate. The next day, when she called my name again, I told her once more that it wasn't my name. She threatened me with another detention, so I calmly pulled out my birth certificate, placed it on her desk and said, "My birth certificate says my name is Alex, so that's what you will call me. Thanks." The look on her face was priceless. From that day on, she called me by my proper name for the rest of the time I was in her class. The third story is called Crushing Revenge. If you don't want your hard taco shells and tostados crushed, I have two recommendations. First, don't leave them out in the open, where any tall child, or perhaps a former employee with a grudge, could easily break them in under a minute. Second, it's probably a good idea to treat your employees fairly, so you don't end up with that former employee feeling slighted in the first place. I have a lisp, which has made life more challenging at times. I've learned to live with it, and I don't usually think about it, except when a toddler on the bus decides to point and laugh, while I'm just minding my own business, talking on the phone. In face-to-face conversations, I prefer to speak only when necessary, and let my body language do some of the work. This was especially true when I worked at a grocery store, and customers would come up with questions. If someone asked where something was and I was close enough, I'd just point to it. If they needed an aisle number and it was 10 or less, I'd hold up my fingers. If they kept asking, I would use my words. But usually, once they heard me speak, they understood why I communicated the way I did. Most customers, about 90%, either didn't mind or were kind about it, but the other 10%, they were the type to complain to management. Eventually, my boss pulled me aside for a talk. I made it clear I wasn't going to change how I communicate, and I even provided some literature on lists to help them understand. They didn't read it. Instead, they let me go. So every Tuesday, I go onto that store and gently remind them of their decision by making sure the hard taco shells and tostados don't make it to the shelves in one piece. It's petty, sure, but over time it's going to cost them more than letting me go ever saved them. And when corporate calls to ask why their numbers are off, I hope they realize this all could have been avoided if they had just shown a little respect. The last story is called Wouldn't Listen. A while back, I was working at a lab where the only internet access came through a cellular router. It worked well, offering great upload and download speeds over the weekend when no one else was using it. Because of this, people like to schedule their large data transfers for Friday afternoons. The main lab internet had an unlimited data plan, but when everyone was on site, it would slow down, and some staff would complain, especially if people started their transfers too early. In addition to the main connection, a few of us had personal lines and routers. Mine had a limited plan, 3 gigs per month, since I only used it occasionally for remote work. One Friday afternoon, I had already worked over 40 hours for the week, unpaid, since I was on salary, so I packed up and was heading out. Just as I was walking out the door, my manager stopped me and insisted I stay to swap SIM cards in the router to test how different plans affected data speeds over the weekend and during the week. I explained that we didn't have unlimited SIMs readily available and that activating a new one would take some time. Instead of listening, the manager insisted I use mine, since I wouldn't need it over the weekend and could activate a new one when I returned. I started to explain that my plan had a data cap, but before I could finish, they cut me off and told me to just do it. So I activated a new SIM for myself, placed my limited data SIM into the main lab router and left for the weekend, knowing full well that large transfers were scheduled. Monday rolled around and the manager didn't say a word. A few more days passed and they finally asked me to check the data usage and speeds. When I pulled up the numbers, I saw that nearly 2 terabytes of data had been transferred. 700 gigs of which had gone through my 3 gigs limited plan. What the manager didn't let me explain was that this particular plan had a $10 per gig overage fee. That one demand ended up costing the lab nearly $7,000 in a single week. From that point on, the manager was much more willing to listen to their team's input. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.